hitting instruction can be complicated. And to a degree, it's complicated because it has to be. If you want to get a hitter all the way to the big leagues, you have to discuss some complicated topics. You have to discuss coil, loading, hitch, separation, stretch, swing plane, running start, those kinds of things. But while those topics are important and necessary to teach hitters in order to get them to the highest levels of the game, probably high school level and above, it's mandatory at the high school level and above, you don't need to teach them to grade school hitters, and you certainly don't need to teach them to hitters who are just starting out. And that's really the focus of this video, is hitters who are just starting out. Especially hitters who are first and foremost just trying to make contact with the ball. And that's who I'm focused on. The hitters who are just trying to make contact with the ball, who don't consistently make contact with the ball, and the coaches and parents of those hitters. I have plenty of videos and plenty of content for more advanced hitters, for the hitters who want to focus on driving the ball and getting the ball another 25, 50, 100 feet. I can take you all the way through the big leagues. But I've got 2 brothers and 5 nephews, and as my kids have gotten older and my pro clients have kind of moved on and retired, I've gotten back into the very low end of the game, working with my nephews and dealing with the very basic issues, starting with just making contact with the ball. And it's interesting, I've also been dealing with some very fundamental issues with my college hitters. Fixing stuff at the college level that I wish had been fixed at the grade school level or even before. And some of these hitters are guys who grow up in inner city environments without strong male father figure presences, without strong coaching environments, and who just kind of tried to figure stuff out on their own and didn't necessarily develop the right habits, the best habits. So I'm putting this video out there for free for coaches, for parents, and even for kids who just want to learn the basics of a swing, how to make contact with the ball, how to have fun with baseball. So starting with the very basics and starting with what I learned from working with the college hitter, stuff that does apply to the very lowest level hitters, but such a basic concept, is this picture of Joe Mauer that really opened my eyes to what hitters need to understand. That picture is just so simple and so basic, but the hitter that I was working with had never come to understand what Joe Mauer is doing in that picture. He was, what the hitter I was working with was doing was, he was trying to do something very different in contact. He thought contact was much more complicated. He thought contact was more about a push and extension and trying to go get the ball and that kind of stuff. And what I explained to him was really all that Joe Mauer was doing in that picture was he was really just turning to the ball, and then he just kind of turned, and then the barrel just kind of whipped out into the path of the pitch. More recently, I came across this picture. This was after I left Harris Stowe, but this picture of Jock Peterson of the Dodgers is a higher quality picture that shows the same exact concept. And then here's another picture of Josh Donaldson that I found just a couple days ago that shows the same basic pattern. All three of these hitters, all of whom are good hitters, they're all moving exactly the same way. All they're doing is just turning to the ball. They're concepts that I talk about in some of my slightly more advanced videos, kind of the next level videos, talking about the box, where you're just setting the box and just turning the box, kind of setting this lag position and then just turning, letting the bat come out of lag. It's a very, very simple movement. The swing doesn't have to be much more complicated than that. In terms of the grip, I don't even talk about the grip with the most basic hitters. There's no point in talking about door knocker knuckles because that's not what the best hitters do. The only thing I care about in terms of the youngest hitters is they should get their hands together, not have them spread far apart. It's better that they use a bat that is correctly sized. I have a bat sizing guide out on the internet that shows roughly the right size of bat that kids should be using for their age. Kids should not be using wood bats until they're 7th grade, 8th grade, when they start to develop strength. Really the grip that most kids are going to be using is called a box grip, which is kind of the classic grip that every major leaguer uses. No major leaguer actually lines up their door knocker knuckles. So just very, very, very simple things. Get the hands together down at the end of the knob. Just kind of grip it and rip it. In terms of other things, when you're dealing with a hitter who is just trying to make contact with the ball, when you're at that point of teaching as a coach, as a parent, in terms of a hitter, keep things very simple. Get sideways to the pitcher. Same thing as in throwing, pitching. Get sideways to everything. It's a rotary motion. It's a rotational motion. So you want to get sideways so we're swinging with the muscles of our hips and our shoulders. You don't have to explain this to them. Just get them sideways and they're naturally going to rotate to make the action happen. It's best if the toes are aligned. If you can draw a line from toe to toe pointing at the pitcher. Don't worry about the front foot being closed. I really don't worry too much. If the feet are roughly shoulder width apart, that's good. So really just shoulder width apart with the toes. Some bounce in the knees is a very important thing. And really, in terms of the legs, just getting some bounce in the knees with the butt sticking out a little bit is kind of the most important thing. And then in terms of the setup, the absolute most important thing, and the thing that people are most likely to screw up, is the position of the bat and the back elbow. What I teach and what I advocate is what I call a flat bat, which is basically the barrel is not exactly flat, but just above flat, just above level to the ground. So just about here. And you'll notice I used to teach back elbow up. I don't know why I taught it. I taught it because everybody taught it. I was taught it. When I was a new coach, I didn't know what to teach, so I taught back elbow up. There's no good reason to teach that. Now when I'm teaching hitters, if you're teaching flat bat, there's no reason to get the back elbow up. if you've got a hitter who's got his back elbow up and a flat bat, that ends up in a pretty awkward position. It's much more natural to just have, with the barrel is flat, and when I say flat, I'm talking about anywhere from kind of here, just off the shoulder, to here or so, 10 degrees to 25 degrees off the shoulder. You do not want the barrel anywhere past flat level to the ground. You do not want the barrel drooping down here. You certainly, the worst mistake that people make is teaching the front elbow down and the barrel up. That's the single biggest mistake that people make. And especially when they combine that, the front elbow down, the barrel up, and the back elbow up. This is an incredibly unathletic position, and it turns a very simple problem into a very difficult problem, because then the hitter doesn't necessarily know how to attack the ball, and you'll end up seeing these kinds of swings. And I've seen this swing, but it turns what could be a very simple action of just turning into a much more complicated action where the hitter doesn't exactly know how to get the barrel to the ball. Because if I'm supposed to keep my barrel up, how do I get to the ball? This is really complicated. Do I go down this way? And believe me, I've seen it. Kids, especially the thinkers, will overthink this. It's much simpler if you start out with the bat flat, and then they just know that, oh, all I have to do is just turn like this. And then as I'm starting out with the bat flat, and then I turn here, and now suddenly I'm Joe Mauer. I'm Josh Donaldson. I'm Jock Peterson. Now that's not what you see in a lot of the modern hitters. No, but this is what you see in Joe DiMaggio. I've got multiple pictures of Joe DiMaggio and a lot of the classic hitters starting in precisely this position. This flat bat position is not a power position. This is an average position. But again, what we're trying to do is we're focused on making contact. I'm trying to put a kid in a position to be successful, to make contact. This is a very simple swing, a very easy swing for a kid to pull off, a very high average swing. Once you perfect this swing, then you can move on to a more complicated power producing swing, but you don't want to make things too complicated. Now the coach's responsibility then, and the nice thing about this, some will ask, so essentially the target is the letters of the uniform. So if you're doing T-ball, set the tee up right here. If you're doing machine pitch, set the machine to pitch right here. If you're doing coach pitch, pitch the ball right here. This is the simplest swing because all the hitter has to do is just turn, just like on the Joe Mauer pick, on the Jock Peterson pick, on the Josh Donaldson pick. All they have to do is turn. And again, you're trying to bring the ball in as flat as possible. You don't want to stand up tall and bring the ball in an arc. That makes it much more complicated, and then the kids are going to start doing these gigantic uppercuts. You want them to just turn, so you want to bring the ball in as flat as you can. underhanded if possible, get down and throw darts a little bit harder. Kids can handle the velocity. They can't handle the arc as easily. And you'll say, won't this limit a kid? Won't this top out? Well, I've done work with Tommy Pham of the Cardinals, and two things were key to his turnaround, his transformation. One was loading, hitching, his hands, all the kind of fancy stuff that I talk in my high-end stuff and that makes hitting really complicated. But another thing that helped Tommy Pham is a very simple idea. In early, mid-July 2015, one of the things that I noticed that he was doing was he was swinging at too many pitchers' pitches. He was swinging at too many first pitch pitches that were down in the zone that at best were strikes. And one of the things I sent him a text that was not the most polite text in the world. It was fairly abrupt and kind of jarring, but I was trying to get his attention, and it basically said, stop swinging at pitchers' pitches until you get 2 strikes. Swing at fastballs, ideally fastballs up in the strike zone. And that worked for him, and that was one of the reasons why Tommy Pham turned into the hitter that he did in 2015. He got away from that a little bit in 2016, got back to it in 2017. But it's just as simple as he learned this swing, this just turn swing. He became a more patient hitter, and instead of chasing all this garbage down in the strike zone, he waited for this pitch that he could just turn on, and he became a more successful hitter. And finally, the advantage of this just turn swing, this very basic kind of start out flat, just turn Joe DiMaggio into Joe Mauer, Josh Donaldson, Jock Peterson swing, is that this is the fundamental swing. And if you perfect this swing, this at the letters swing, it's very easy to transform this into a swing that can adjust to pitches down in the strike zone by learning to adjust via your body, via your legs, via your front leg, via your hips, via your torso. This is the fundamental movement here. And if you can perfect that fundamental movement, learning to adjust is very easy. But that's why I teach this first, this very fundamental, simple swing, because if you can get this right, then everything else comes easily.